All right. Welcome back, everyone, to another Tour Tuesday event. We hope you had a nice spring break. My name is Lizzie Gray, and I'm a project coordinator for Connected Lane County. As always, I will be your host today. And for today's event, I'm joined by Solomon Harris, the owner of Cutting Edge Illusions. Solomon, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. So make sure you can still hear me. Can you still hear me?
You're
Great. Yeah, so I'm Solomon Harris. I'm the owner and operator of Cutting Edge Illusions, also known as CEI Coatings. We are a paint, powder coating, and media blasting company based here in Eugene.
Awesome. So before we start, I just want to remind everyone that by now you should have watched the pre-recorded tour video of CEI's operation. My coworker Jenna would have sent that to you last week and then again this morning. So if you haven't watched it already, make sure to do so after this Q&A. It's only about 25 minutes long. And as always, while we are chatting, we cannot see or hear you, but encourage you to type in any questions that you have for Solomon into the chat box. We will have plenty of time to get to all of your questions, so take advantage of the opportunity. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Okay, so in the tour video, you mentioned what you studied in college, that you went to school in the Midwest and that you studied mechanical engineering and business. What was the end goal when you chose those two majors?
That's a great question. Well, like anybody that age, I thought I knew my end goal, but I didn't really know my end goal. I started studying engineering basically because I had a lot of interest in how things work. So in elementary school and high school, I was often doing, when I had independent study type stuff, I would do them on topics on, how different types of machines work, whether it be airplanes or jet engines or things of that nature. So going into college, I actually started in aerospace engineering because I really, at the time, liked airplanes. As a freshman in college, so I also played basketball in college. And as a freshman, one of the seniors on the team who was about to graduate mechanical engineering convinced me that I should switch to mechanical engineering. And his logic was, if it was airplanes I really wanted to work on, most of the work on airplanes is mechanical anyway. Just the shape is aerospace. And if I ever wanted to work in a different industry, mechanical engineering kind of is a little more general. So it does kind of branch over into a lot of different industries other than just the aerospace industry. So that's how I kind of ended up shifting into mechanical engineering. From there, I did a couple of internships, and one specifically at Honeywell. After my Honeywell internship, I decided I didn't really want to be a big business engineer. It just was a little tedious, I guess, is the way to put it. And so that's when I decided to also get a business degree to give myself flexibility to work kind of in different parts of business, not just the engineering part of the business. It also gave me opportunity to work in more industries than just industries that use mechanical engineers. So I guess my end goal at the time was I knew I wanted to be some kind of manager and or start or own a business. So that's kind of what started me on that path.
Well, that's kind of what you're doing, isn't it?
So yes, I did end up doing that in a kind of long, strange path to being in the coatings industry.
Very cool. So you've talked a little bit about so doing some internships, and then cut to how many years after your schooling did you open CEI?
So I actually purchased CEI. How many years after school? I think it was about 12 years after school. I actually worked in a completely unrelated industry. I was in telecommunications, specifically wireless.
Wow.
So I worked at I started off after grad school as a management consultant. Prior to grad school, I did a couple jobs that were fun. I worked for a professor who was a consultant that we did accident reconstruction work. So if a car was in a car wreck, we would measure crush damage and figure out how fast the cars were going and what directions. Or if there was a product that burst into flames, we'd figure out, what caused the fire in the dryer or something like that. But then I ended up being a management consultant. So I worked specifically in telecommunications, which then after a project turned into a job at Nextel. So I worked for Nextel for quite a few years, and then Sprint bought Nextel. So I was at Sprint Nextel for a little while. And then I had an idea to start a business in wireless, which me and several people, wrote a business plan and raised some money for it. But the market ended up being right for it. So after about a year, we shut it down and returned the investment money. And then I ended up working at a cable company doing marketing. But at that time, I had a mentor back when I was management consulting that had introduced the concept. Before then, I did not think about the concept of purchasing a business. I had the idea of starting businesses or working in businesses, but purchasing one was not something I was familiar with. And that mentor kind of opened my eyes to that world. So I started looking for a business to purchase. And that's where I stumbled on this business. It was a lot smaller then, a lot less expensive. And then so in 2008 is when I purchased it.
Okay, so a career path that kind of goes like this.
Yes,
like
exactly.
All somewhat related. So that mentor that you had that kind of sparked the idea of looking for an existing business to purchase. What were some of the pros to purchasing an existing business versus starting your own?
So the pros, actually, if you want to get into your own business, one of the things I learned is the largest community of entrepreneurs are actually franchise owners. And buying a business is not quite as supportive as getting into a franchise, but it's the same idea in that when you get in, if you can get into a franchise, the franchisor, like if you buy a McDonald's, they have all of the ways to do business figured out, and they can hand you that model, and you have to hire people and manage people. But how your registers work and what your menu is and where you get food from and all that stuff's already figured out for you. So it's an easy way to jump into, if you're going to jump into the restaurant business and didn't know anything about it, going in on a franchise is a well-supported way. Whereas starting a restaurant from scratch, you've got to figure out how to cook, figure out your own menu, figure out your own point of sale system and all that stuff. So buying a business, you get the benefit of, you have existing customers, you have an existing kind of way to do business. And, as you transition from the previous owner, you have some training. Not as robust as, doing a franchise, but a better way to, or, for me, I was jumping to a completely new industry, I'm not completely starting from scratch. Right. The downside to purchasing a business is, at the end of the day, if you are in an industry well, it's probably going to be more expensive to buy a business than to start from scratch, because you usually end up paying more than it would cost just to get the equipment or things that you needed. But in exchange for that, you're getting some customers and some brand that's already known and some track record and that sort of thing. Sure. But that would be the downside, I'd say, of purchasing over starting.
When you purchase a business, do you also get the existing employees?
Yes. So when you buy a business, actually for small businesses, the way that most of them are, the way the actual legal purchase goes, you don't actually buy the business. The accountants don't actually do it that way. What you do is you register your business, which is a new business legal entity in the state, and the old business entity, the person selling, effectively sells you everything that they own. Huh. So it's called an asset purchase, is the way that the accountants put it together. And so you get, the website, you get all the equipment. And then so from an employee standpoint, you basically have a day when you close, and it's as if they're rehired. So they transition to the new company, but they basically change over because there's a new tax ID number for the new business. So it's like they're rehired that day.
Huh. That's interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah. Bigger businesses will actually you just buy the you buy the business as a whole and everything with it. But for small businesses, the asset purchase is a more common way. I don't understand all the tax benefit to that, but I think it basically has to do with tax benefit for the person selling the business. Okay. It's better for them to do it that way.
Okay. We have a business CTE class on the line, and they would like to know, what is your form of business ownership and why did you choose that form?
That is a great question. We are organized as a corporation with S Corp tax status. So as whoever asked that question has probably studied, you have a number of different entities. You have sole proprietorship, you have a limited liability corporation, limited liability partnership, a partnership, and a corporation. In my opinion, the corporation would always be my preferred entity. The reason many don't do it is, on the surface, it appears more complicated because you technically, legally, when you register, you have to have, named officers, so a president, a treasurer, and a secretary, although all three of those can be the exact same person. You technically have to have a corporate agent, but that can also be the exact same person. And then you technically have a board, but that can also be the same person. And you don't really even have to have board meetings if you're doing something that's board level. You have, in a corporation, you have a shareholders agreement, which is basically an agreement amongst shareholders on how you can buy and sell shares in the company. But in a LLC or an LLP, you have an operating agreement, which is basically the same thing. So it's not really any more or less complicated between the two. The biggest benefit to a corporation is if your business grows and you want to bring in other investors, it is easier because you basically issue shares and sell shares. Whereas with a LLC or LLP, everything's just a percentage ownership. So you kind of have to rewrite your operating agreement to bring on additional partners. So it is more, it's more flexible. And since I came, a lot of my background experience was in tech, which tech tends to go through venture capital funding and try to be public one day. If you ever go that path, they always want you as a corporation. Like, you can't go public and not be a corporation. The S status is just strictly a tax thing. It's not a legal entity change. And what that allows a small corporation to do, if you have limited shareholders, is it's considered a pass-through entity. So if the business makes $100 at the end of the year, if you're a regular corporation, you file your taxes and you pay taxes on $100. If the $80 are left, you want to give to the shareholders, that's a dividend, and then the shareholders have to then pay taxes on those dividends. If it's a pass-through, then that $100 that the business made gets passed through to the owners as income, whether they take the money out of the business or not. And then on their own tax returns, they would pay taxes on it. That's a benefit that people like from LLCs and LLPs. They will pass through on those. But you can do the same thing with a corporation with that status, is you can pass through. So when you're small, it has the benefit of, if you do make a profit, you don't have to pay taxes on it twice if the owner chooses to use those profits for, personal living.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Wow. You should go down to Cottage Grove and co-teach that class. Happy to have you. So you, when you mentioned your schooling, you made a comment about how you don't necessarily directly use much of that schooling in the work that you do now, but you use it indirectly all the time.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember making that comment, but could you elaborate just a little bit on what you mean by that?
Sure. So in mechanical engineering, to boil it down, kind of the main things you study are the physics, but the mechanics of physics. So you're not studying astrophysics or anything like that. You're studying more like what center of gravities and why do things fall, and work and power and that sort of thing. And what you do with that, what you learn, is you apply it to solve problems. So by studying engineering, one of the things that you have to learn to do is solve problems. So I'd say one of the biggest skills I learned in engineering that I use almost every day is problem solving. And specifically, what I learned in engineering is you get a complex problem like, say the way that a gas engine generates power, okay? And it has 400 moving parts in it. But at the end of the day, Newton's second law, force equals mass times acceleration. The piston gets a force, that force comes out of the drive shaft. So to solve that problem on the surface, you look at it, there's 400 parts, it would seem like a daunting task to try to solve for all that. But as you start to think about it, it's really just a list of small problems that add up to a big one. So you can piece it out piece by piece. And that skill set is applicable to almost anything. If you think about working in construction and building Hayward Field is a tremendously big project, but it's really just a group of small problems that have to all be linked together. In the business I have now, we have a lot of, bigger complex things we have to figure out how to get done. But the trick is breaking it down into pieces that you can handle, and doing that in a way that's going to give you the total outcome. So I would say that's the biggest thing that I use. I don't use the calculus I had to take basically ever. I don't really remember a lot of the calculus. I do use some of the basic physics. I mean, we have forklifts, and center of gravity is very important on a forklift. Concepts of torque is very important on a forklift, so you don't tip the thing over. We have to coat heavy things, so figuring out how to hang those heavy things in a way that's going to be safe uses some of those basic physics stuff that we would have learned. But I haven't used thermodynamics since I had it in college. Don't need to. Well, actually, I do use it a little bit because we use compressors. So there is a slight bit of that stuff used. But the biggest thing would be the learning the problem solving and how to take a complex problem and break it into simpler problems.
Great. So I'm going to pivot slightly. You mentioned Archimoto a couple times in the video. Sounds like they're a great partner of yours. And I'm just curious how that relationship started.
So it started very, very early in Archimoto's development. So Archimoto has been in the news more in the last year or two, and they're getting big, and they've actually gone public. So they were a corporation that's not publicly traded. But they started building prototypes probably over 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. Early on, we used to work with them strictly. Some of the people on my team knew some of the people on their team, and they were trying, something quick on how to put a fender on. And we used to make fiberglass fenders for motorcycles, and one of those fenders worked, for what they were trying to do. So, very early on, it was just, we made a few fenders for them, sold them some LED lights to put on their prototypes. And then over time, as they were building prototypes, we would paint some of the prototypes for them. And then we added powder coating. And so as they actually started producing, then we started powder coating their components for them, and we've continued to paint parts for them. So we've just kind of evolved with them and grown with them. Now I expect over time, if they continue to grow like they are, they're gonna phase us out to an extent, because they'll start doing some of the stuff we do for them themselves. But I expect that we'll continue to work with them a lot, for a few years to come, at least.
That's great. So it's been a long partnership. And what would you say what are some keys to long-term, partner building?
Yeah, so the biggest thing to any long-term business partnership that I've been involved in is seeking a win-win. So there are business relationships that I've been in where, as a vendor, if I'm a vendor and that's my customer, obviously old adage, the customer is always right. You try to service your customer. So from our standpoint, we try to be as easy to do business with as we possibly can. We don't try to make them change the way they do business for our convenience if they're a customer. But we have some customers that see us just as a vendor, like it's a one-off kind of thing, even though it's a repeating thing, like they're trying to manufacture something. And those relationships don't tend to work well over the long run, because on their end, they just want to beat us down as much on price so they can make as much profit as they can, and they don't really care if we do well. And so it's not a sustainable relationship. Some of our longer term partners, though, understand that we need to be successful as well as we want them to be successful. And so those are usually the relationships that work the best and generally, drive the most value. Far West is our biggest customer, and that's always been their approach with us, is they want us to win. And, you know, so when we get in a situation where their end customer is beating them up on price, you know, they don't just beat us up. We sit down and talk about, you know, what solutions can we do? What things can they do that might make us be able to bring our costs down? What can we do to help them bring their costs down and try to find a win-win solution, you know, versus acting very transactional, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Far West was our first tour stop this spring in our series. So
great.
In Archimoto, we visited them, I think, either in the fall or last spring. Where else could a Lane County student see some of your guys' work around town?
Other than those places? Well, over Christmas, we did a job for a construction project that's on campus. So we've actually done 2 University of Oregon related projects in the last 6 months. One of them is kind of in the bowels, but it's the giant screen that they put up at Autzit Stadium. We had to, that part of that, the lower part of that screen has a mesh siding on it. And so the support beams that were behind it needed to be black. And so we painted a whole bunch of hundreds of support beams black for them. So if you're ever near that and you can see through the mesh and you see something black behind it, that was us. Not super exciting. The other is the new science complex that they're building on campus. So the first building's done with the bridge over Franklin. Behind it towards Autzit Stadium, there is a new parking structure that used to be a parking lot right by the train tracks, but now it's like a 4-level parking structure. On that parking structure, there is a bunch of decorative aluminum fins that mount vertically. And they are 2-toned. They're dark green towards the inside of the parking deck and light green on the outside. And there's almost 900 of them. We coated all of those mostly in December.
Wow. And so all of that coating has to happen in your facilities.
Yeah, we do occasionally do things that are not in the facility. There are other companies in town that specialize in contract painting. So they might paint a building or paint the interior of a building. But sometimes we have projects that, you know, overflow into that. So like the parking structure as an example, we did most of that coating here. It was powder coated. When they installed, they damaged some of the parts. So we went out on site and touched up and fixed parts for them out there. We've done a little bit of work for like Lane Transit District on the MX line. So we might powder coat handrails for those, but then if they have a shelter and we've got we've painted some of those on site. I do hold a contractor's license. So we do have the ability to do that. It's just not, offsite paint is not a focus of ours. We are actually doing one offsite right now also for LTD at the new Santa Clara station. But we powder coated the structure originally here. And then when they installed it, they had some conduit that they wanted to match. So it's already installed, so we have to paint it on site. So we're doing that on site. But yeah, the vast majority is stuff that can be brought to us.
Okay, cool. So of the things that you just mentioned, I can't picture like sticking the CEI logo anywhere on those things. Like you talk about the black beams and the like jump.
Yes.
So how and where do you advertise?
So we have 2 main markets. We serve business to business and we serve business to consumer. The consumer, the work that we do is mostly people who are looking to customize something. You know, often it's a vehicle, but we've done computers and guitars and other things like that. Our main driver on that side is our website, our cuttingedgeillusions.com site. That site gets around 15,000 unique visitors a month. It also has a Facebook page that supports it that I think is got around 150,000. I don't know if they still do it as our followers, I guess, however they do that on Facebook now. We're not super active on Instagram really on that. We do like Google AdWords. So we do Google search really well, sometimes too well. We get probably a couple calls every day of somebody who is just looking for touch-up paint, and they're looking for a company called Color Ripe, or for some reason when they Google search, they end up on our phone number, or, you know, people that don't realize where we actually are. So I would say our vast majority of consumer work is driven through Google search. We have a second site, the CEI Coatings, that's more designed and geared towards business, manufacturing, and construction customers and fleet. That site, I haven't actually paid advertise on it. It's been more just organic. But as the site has been out there, the traffic kind of grows every quarter. And so, you know, we were actually seeing consumer work coming through that site now of local people looking for powder coat. So it is starting to search well that way. But powder coating specifically, I haven't done much of any traditional advertising. Most of our sales are driven on the business side through our strategic partners. So through companies like Far West and Mid Valley Metals, Mohawk Metals, we develop a really good working relationship with them and hopefully become their coder of choice. So as they sell projects, they bring us along for those projects. So in essence, I've outsourced our outside sales in that way to some of our bigger customers.
Right. Very cool. That class would also like to know, what prerequisites does someone need to work at Cutting Edge?
Prerequisites. So let's see. Well, it depends on what you're doing. So I would say an entry-level position here does not technically have any prerequisites. We do tend to train, you know, it's trial by fire. Like, we're not a big company, so it's not like we can have somebody shadow somebody else for 6 months or whatever. You do tend to get kind of thrown in, but we tend to train up what we're doing. So, you know, we have people that come with experience in the industry. We have other people come with zero experience. The main thing that I would say people that are successful working in production for us, what they tend to bring, the big things are a sense of urgency, a good work ethic. So people that, you know, not only work hard, but have, you know, that sense of urgency to get things done, work well. People that are self-starters work well. So we have systems, there's plenty of information, but from a management standpoint, we stretch ourselves thin. So people that can, you know, look at the shelves, see what needs to get done, and look at a work order and go get it done, do well. You know, there are skill sets. Powder coat is a very trainable skill set. If you're got good attention to detail and can keep yourself organized, you could be trained to do well at powder coat. Some basic science is a bonus. I wouldn't say that most have that, but you know, that is a bonus. When I say that, it'd just be things like the basic physics I mentioned, or, you know, understanding just what voltage is versus current, because we do electrostatic stuff. But that's not a huge prerequisite. On the paint side, painting, especially painting through like an HVLP system, is a trade type skill. So that does take, some people pick it up fast that have talent for it. Others, it takes time and training to get good at it. You know, so you have to kind of learn the equipment, you have to learn how to apply. There's a lot of nuanced techniques to getting a good film. So, you know, we have a few people here that have a lot of experience with that. And some of them can definitely train to an extent. But that is an area that is, we tend to try to look for a little bit of experience in, is the actual spraying of paint. The good thing though is we have such a breadth of type of work that we spray on. There are things that somebody with less experience could do. And there are definitely things they couldn't touch for years. But you know, we do kind of have a broad range of that. But the reality is, in most coating, 60 to 70% of the work is just getting it ready to be coated, and the actual application is a relatively small percentage of the labor that goes into it. So we tend to hire more people. We need a lot more people that can help process things than we actually need to apply product.
So you named some of the qualities that you look for in employees. Where do you go looking for them? Where do you post jobs when you have them available?
The main tool I've been using in the last few years has been Indeed. Okay. So we post jobs in Indeed. We do tend to use some kind of pre-testing, but honestly, inside tip, I'll put a pre-test up. It doesn't take that long to do, but I use it less for the results and more for somebody being serious enough to just take the time to do it.
Yes.
And I found that a lot of people just won't do it. So if they're not willing to do that, then to me, that means they're not very serious about the position.
Sure. So I hadn't seen pre-testing done before in the hiring process until this winter while my partner applied for a job. And there were multiple pre-tests he had to pass and he went into banking. But for someone who might not know, what is pre-testing in the hiring process?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different tools out there. Indeed has started to build one into their platform. I've used another one called OneScore, which is from a company called Wonderlic, which is kind of famous because their assessments have been used in the NFL for quarterbacks. So that's kind of their name to fame is their quarterback assessing. There's a variety of tools. In essence, most of those tools will evaluate 2 or 3 different types of things. One of them will be an attempt at a personality screen. And so on the personality screen, they're just looking at things like temperament and that kind of thing. And the good tools like OneScore have been around and done enough of them that when you set it up, you give them an idea of the type of job and they're looking for the right fit for the job. So the same person could take the same screening and they might be highly recommended for one job and not highly recommended for another job with the same score. The other thing, so the personality screen might be split into 2, OneScore because it's kind of 2 dimensions on it. Others might just be 1, but they're really looking for, how are you under pressure? Do you like organization? Do you like rules? Do you not like rules? Do you tend to be punctual? That kind of stuff. The other part of some of the assessments will try to assess, your ability to problem solve. Or basic math skills or things of that nature. And there's a lot of different tools. They could be tailored a lot of different ways. The OneScore one has kind of a generic, their problem solving one will just have like little puzzles and things. And it's a timed thing, like you only have 12 minutes to do it, and then they'll score you out that way. And that one's the same way. So like you might have somebody who flies through that and scores off the chart, and they might actually not recommend that person because they're like, the job you're hiring for, that person's going to get bored with in 2 weeks, So they actually create a range on that score too. So, too high or too low may not be the right fit.
Okay. I mean, my takeaway was the exact same. Watching him kind of jump through those hoops, I was like, this is brilliant because it weeds out the folks who aren't really committed
right.
to wanting to work there. So
yeah. And Indeed as a platform makes it really easy to apply for a lot of jobs. And so I found when I post, I might have 50 to 100 applicants in 36 hours. And then I send out the link to do an assessment and 10 of them will do it.
Right.
So it is a good pre-filter. So if I would recommend to anyone listening, if you are serious about a job, do the assessment, even if you don't think you're going to do well at it, because you don't know that it might fit well. The other thing is going into an interview, I would always recommend, to the extent you can, researching the company to make sure that you're somewhat familiar with at least what they do. And that can be as simple as just actually reading their website, reading the About Us part, and if they have a kind of company history and what their products and services are. Is probably all you really need to do. But to come in with a general perspective on what they do can go a long ways. Personally, whenever I've interviewed for jobs, what I try to do is know enough about the job requirements and the business so that I can explain how any of my experience in education is actually beneficial to that. Yeah. So, to be able to twist. And so if you don't do that homework, then you can't really, pitch yourself that way.
Right. And I've noticed too, in working with a lot of folks in HR around the county, a standard question in an interview is, tell us what you know about us. And if you're sitting there and you have no idea and you don't have an answer, it's not going to look very good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a colleague that runs a larger telecom business in town. And he said, whenever he does interviews, his first two questions are, what do you know about the company? And what did you do to prepare? And if he's not happy with those first two answers, he's done with the interview.
Wow.
Yeah.
That would be a lesson learned for sure. If you're not.
Yes.
So the next question in the chat actually segues really nicely into something that I wanted to chat about. I didn't get to attend the pre-recording of this tour, but I did take an in-person tour with students maybe 2 years ago. And one of the things that really stuck out to me was watching a gentleman at a workbench painting like this elaborate, insane skull on like a motorcycle.
Yes.
You call it. So I immediately, it just jumped out as just art, like creative minds, artistic people. And then the question in the chat is, you have some super sick designs on your website. What kind of creative freedom can people have with designs? And so can we just touch on your employees who are artistic?
Sure. So a lot of what you see on the website is a lot of custom and artistic work. And it is always the most appealing part of the business. It also tends to be the part of the business that contributes the least to paying the bills. But one of the, I guess, what can be the catch-22 of getting it, of being paid to do something like that, is most of the time you don't have a lot of creative latitude, because you have a client who has something they want, and you're really trying to understand what they want and execute it in a way that they will like, which is a little different than just being able to express yourself artistically. So Mike, who's the guy you probably saw doing that, who's worked here for quite a long time, he's for the most part found a good balance. I mean, we do have occasional clients that'll be like, I like these colors, and just give me ideas, and he can just be creative. But we have a lot of customers that approach it more like you might approach a tattoo, where you go look through all our designs and be like, I like that one, do that, And so there's not a lot of creativity involved in it. I think what Mike tends to channel his creativity into when he's doing something that is pretty structured is he still gets into the nuance of how to bring it to life. Yeah. So where he really has an eye that's always amazed me is he can look at something very simple and understand how the highlighting and shadowing in just the right places, really bring it to life or make it jump off the tank, or, whatever you're trying to do. I can give him something as simple as a stencil for a military logo that somebody wants, and he can take that and make it look like, a three-dimensional badge. And so I think that detailed part is kind of where he gets to channel some of that. The other thing that we do occasionally when we're slow, which hopefully doesn't happen very often, is, we have samples. You might remember seeing the little half tanks we hang around the walls and stuff. He gets to do whatever he wants when we do those.
Tons of creative freedom there.
Yeah, so he does get some creative freedom to do those. Absolutely.
Great. Yeah, that's awesome. This is a fun question. What keeps you happy in the work that you do?
What keeps me happy? I think for me personally, it is, it's building something that works. So whether that be a process or the way that we do something and it creates a consistent outcome, or it's, good customer satisfaction. It is always good to get good feedback from customers. after you've delivered something for them. And also for me, it's fun to see the transformation of a lot of the things that come through. So from the boring to the exciting, you know, you might see somebody's, you know, old wrought iron lawn furniture come in. It just looks like trash. And then by the time it leaves, it looked like it was just made yesterday. You know, even some of the mundane things, those are interesting. And, you know, I've always enjoyed problem solving. So there's never a shortage of problems for us to solve around here. So I get to do that constantly.
And you're like head problem solver. Like if
yes.
levels can't figure it out, then it's left to just you.
Exactly.
What's the pay variety at CEI? Some jobs seem skill-based, like artwork, and others seem like nothing. What's the pay variety?
With the pay range?
Sure.
Yeah. So typically we start in the $12 to $15 an hour range. But again, that depends on the experience that's coming. So that could be higher. We have, I would say on the upper end in our range is probably in the mid 20s. The main driver of, you know, what somebody's making is contribution. Okay. It's not tenure. It's not certain jobs don't inherently pay more than others. At the end of the day, you know, for the business to be successful, you know, we have to be able to pay our bills. And our number one thing that drives whether or not we pay bills is how much work we're able to turn out on a daily basis without rework or flaws in it. Okay. And so every step in that process contributes to that end. So the more that somebody helps drive that volume, you know, the more value they're adding. And that value can be added at any step, whether you're applying the powder, whether you're prepping the part, whether you're receiving the part, whether you're, you know, packing the part. It really doesn't matter. It matters how you can figure out how to do that job productively.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I was a student and I wanted to job shadow at Cutting Edge, which I know we've sent students your way before, what kind of job do you see? Like some specific job titles?
If you were to job shadow here, I mean, if you're really literally shadowing, if you don't have to do anything, I mean, you can shadow a painter. So you could see either automotive paint application or industrial paint application. Those two look differently. You could shadow a powder coater, see what that application looks like. You could shadow in material handling, which, you know, may or may not sound mundane to some. I mean, that's in many ways that material handling is it can be tedious at times, but because we're a job shop, we're constantly getting different things. And so there was constantly this puzzle to solve on how to move it, how to handle it if it's big and heavy, how to hang it if it's going powder coated, you know, all those kinds of things. It's a game of Tetris all the time. How to palletize it is another game of Tetris. So it's actually probably one of the more challenging things to do day in and day out, to do productively because of that constant variety. I mean, you can shadow Mike, although I don't know many that want to do that for very long because he's a grumpy little artist. But yeah, you know, he can shadow him and see him do his craft. I'm trying to think about a minute now. That's about it. I mean, we do media blasting. So
what's Ariel's position?
Oh yeah, I guess you could shadow in the office too. Ariel is our director of support services. So what that looks like is she does all of our revenue stuff, which means she's doing invoicing. She does a lot of our sales support work, which means when our business customers send us purchase orders, we have to write orders that go into our system to get the work done. She does some estimating and quoting. She's kind of our interface a lot of times between customers and production. So she might be getting customer requirements or due dates or changes in priority, and she's making sure those happen on the floor. And she does a little of everything other than actually apply. She does a lot of, so a lot of our pricing, especially in powder coat and blasting, is driven by surface area. How many square feet are we coating? So she does a lot of, if they're new parts, she's either reading drawings or measuring parts to calculate the surface area of those parts. So, there's some basic geometry involved in that. And then she's our main kind of work order system. She led implementing that. So she knows more about how the system itself works and configures it and corrects things and fixes things that are mistracked or whatever on the floor. So she does that as well.
That's great. So yeah, a little bit of everything.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna wrap us up with one last question. So following every Tour Tuesday, we have a Working Wednesday, which is a webinar where we're joined by professionals and we kind of take a deep dive onto into a professional skill or a soft skill, some people call them. We like to call them professional skills. And the topic for tomorrow's webinar is social media etiquette. My question to you as a business owner and a boss and someone in the hiring process, do you look at potential employees' social medias?
Yes. Yeah. Not consistent. Well, yeah, no, I'd say consistent. I don't personally do it, but someone on our team will, if we think we're getting serious with somebody, we'll look at some social media.
What are you looking for?
I think in general, we are looking for validation of the impression that was left in the interview.
Sure.
So, if somebody, so I guess, red flags would be if, if we're looking for somebody who's going to be punctual, be on time, and be responsible. And if, somebody's social media post suggests otherwise, then, that could be it. I mean, to give horror stories, I guess, in the past, we've had active employees that will do things like call in sick and then post on social media of like being at the beach or whatever, at the coffee shop, and that'll be seen. So obviously not a good look. So yeah, I would say that can play in sometimes too.
Okay, so it carries some weight, whether you're
yes.
a wannabe employee or a current employee.
Right.
Okay, great. So to every student on the call, tune in tomorrow because we're going to take a deep dive into the importance of social media etiquette when looking for a job. Thank you, Solomon. We really, really appreciate your time for filming the tour and today.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Absolutely. Alrighty, everybody, we will see you either tomorrow or next Tuesday where we will tour the Eugene Springfield Fire Department. All right. Bye.
Bye.